to Coffee at 11 this morning with my very special guest, Valerie O'Connor, a good friend of mine. Valerie, say hi and cheers.
Bring your cup over. Say cheers. Come on, Colin. Bring your cup over to this side of the screen.
Valerie, I'm going to introduce you first, Val, if that's okay, and for about 2 minutes, all the nice things you wrote about yourself, and then we'll bring you in and we'll have a conversation. Is that okay, yeah? So Valerie O'Connor, business name Vals Kitchen. What does your business do? I write about and teach about good food, good provenance, and especially fermentation. I started my blog in 2006. Wow, was the internet even born then? How many employees? Just me. So Valerie O'Connor returned to Limerick in 2008 after several years in Dublin, working as a press photographer. Very interesting. She had a dream to be a food writer, blah, 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 and got stuck into that. You either have to independently wealthy or marry rich to do that, she says, and she did neither. So after starting her blog in 2006, she was approached by the McKennas to write for the Bridgestone Irish food guides and took the opportunity to write about as many Limerick food establishments as possible. Following the publication of her first cookbook, Bread on the Table, in 2014, she started writing for all the major Irish papers. So we're not dealing with muck here, folks. Irish Independent, Health Supplements, Sunday Times, Food and Wine, and the weekly column, The Irish Examiner. In this time, she also retrained as an organic horticulturalist, if I got that word right. TV appearances with the likes of Kevin Dundon and Rachel Allen, as well as a guest slot as judge on MasterChef, meant Valerie was invited for many speaking engagements at food festivals and food literary events. She also works as a food stylist on many photo shoots and on TV productions at Troy Studios. That was a very exciting period. Valerie was asked by the Limerick and Clare Education Board to teach organics and sustainable living in the inner city. She is currently loving her teaching online, moving her teaching online to move this new situation.
I'm sure I'd be loving it too.
And something nobody knows about you, she says, I'm a poet. And then she says, no, they probably know that.
That's a poem.
Valerie O'Connor, you are more than welcome to Coffee at 11. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks, Colin.
We're going to start with, as we always do, who is Valerie O'Connor outside of all of that litany of qualifications?
Litany. Why don't we ask somebody else who they think I am? Because that's not how it goes, Val. Okay, well, I guess, you know, it's great when you write your own bio. Sometimes we don't put enough of the things that we've done into our biography, but I guess we've all been on the earth now for a little while, so we'd want to have something under our belt. Yeah, the press photography was a very interesting and exciting time, but unfortunately a lot of the work that we were asked to do in the newspaper was to go and sit outside people's houses and doorstep them and stalk them and follow people out of the coroner's court and take pictures of them. And, you know, you really just have to be of a certain type of person to be able to do that job and not find it difficult. And I found it very difficult, other than the times when Glenda Gilson might be wrapped around a beer bottle, you know, or Claudine Palmer was draped across a taxi, you know, in a Santa bikini. Not that Santa ever wore a bikini. I don't think so. Maybe he did for Mrs. Claus. Sorry, this has gone way off already. So Dublin, you know, Dublin was very expensive. My kids were in a very expensive creche. I had to earn so much money just, you know, to pay for the necessities. And as well as that, I never saw my kids. You know, childcare, all those things were big issues. And I just found the work was not what I had in mind. You know, obviously, of course, we all just want to go straight for National Geographic. And I have had one picture in National Geographic, so should have put that in my bio. And we were at home one day in Limerick, like I'm from here. My eldest, we were just, you know, horsing around down at the Hunt Museum where my mum was working. And he said, why don't we move back to Limerick? And I was like, Jesus, it never occurred to me. But we did take a shot. I got them into a pretty good school here, St. Michael's. And I got some work in the Limerick Independent. I was offered work in the Limerick Leader. Initially, I worked as a photographer and I worked at Press 22. But I just felt I was kind of making this big move and then going a little bit backwards. Whereas really I wanted to change direction altogether. But I guess, look, everybody knows that the work and the opportunities are in the capital. So when you move out, initially I was actually going back to Dublin for jobs. I would drive up and down because the money was so good that it was worth it. But after time, I was doing a lot of work for pharmaceutical companies at that stage as well. And you could just write your own, you know, you could write anything on the check, right? So, yeah, loads of income and, you know, lots of Christian Dior nonsense, but I was empty inside. It was just completely unfulfilling. Whatever you did, whatever effort you put into your photo shoot, the next day would just be the dog in the cat litter tray. And so, yeah, and I was working for the Star, and no offense to the Star, they're a great establishment, but it's not the Irish Times. And I know you do have to work your way up, but it isn't something, photography isn't something that I've completely put on the bonfire for my life either. I absolutely love it, and I still do food photography. But working in photography in that way can really take the love out of it for you, because you have to do it, you know, all day, every day. You're humping your gear around the place, and it's very competitive, and it's, but yeah, you know, so, and the handy thing about that is when I came down here and I decided I wanted to get into food writing, I had all my connections in the newspapers already. So I didn't even put that in the bio that I did get into doing food PR as well for restaurants and food companies, or not food companies, mainly restaurants and brands. So I already had all my contacts, and I knew all the journalists, and I knew everybody on the picture desk. So if I did something and I took pictures and I sent them in, it was pretty likely they'd get used, because all the shortcuts, you know, I had all the shortcuts. So that's very handy.
It sounds fantastic. Like it's some journey. The press photography piece, your skill set around photography clearly aided you when you got into food photography on behalf of clients, I think initially, and on behalf of which came first, your book work or Vals Kitchen? Can you bring us into Vals Kitchen?
I started doing my blog in 2006 when I was still living in Dublin, and when I was really finding the whole photography thing, I suppose creatively non-existent, and blogging had just started a couple of years ago. So I just started a blog really to get some fulfillment for myself. You know, I wanted to do something, I suppose. You know, I did originally when I was a young'un, I did go to art college. So I would have, I mean, creativity is across the board in every kind of business. But I did feel a need for that creative outlet. So, and my mum and dad are voracious cooks and mad into their food. My dad was at sea for 5 years as a radio officer in the Merchant Navy. So he went all over the world. So when he married my mother, she'll kill me for saying this, she did a cookery course, right, to cater for his needs, which now is very cute when you look back, you know. So we grew up eating very exotic food. You know, we had curries and bolognese, and my mum would spend entire days making, you know, very elaborate dishes and cakes, and I was the one out of the three of us who just, you know, liked being in the kitchen with her. So I was just in there all the time, and I learned everything by osmosis. So anything that I can do in the kitchen, well, other than the stuff that I learned in my travels afterwards, I learned it from her and from my dad. They were just so into food, and every meal we had, there would just be a discussion about the food. And I suppose the likes of which that you wouldn't see a lot of in Ireland, you might see. Now, look, we're not like the Italians or anything, but it was that level of care. My dad grew his own veg out in the back garden. You know, we grew up in a semi-detached house with a fairly decent sized garden. So he grew his own veg. He made his own beer, his own wine. He's a carpenter. My mom made our clothes. She made the school uniforms for other kids, you know, living in the area. So I'd say if my parents were in their 30s or 40s now, they would be tragically hip. They'd be hipsters. They'd have their own TV show. So I grew up in that. And I think a lot of us grew up in that. And I think anyone, I suppose, in their late 40s and upwards, we're quite lucky in that we had that thing of making assumptions, right? I know lots of people, both of their parents worked, but our mums were at home. And this resourcefulness was there all the time. People made things. It wasn't that there was scarcity, but you paid attention and respect to what you had, and you fixed things. And I think what's happening now in the world, like at this moment, you know, with the virus and everything all these challenges that we're facing, any kind of skills that you have, be it, you know, planting potatoes, and you don't even need skills to do that. You know, I'm finding, okay, one of the taps in the bathroom isn't working. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do, you know, that kind of stuff, things I hadn't done before myself. And I'm pretty resourceful, but of course, some of the classic stuff, male, female, can I still say that? Yeah, I can change a plug, I can put up a shelf, but no, I wouldn't be great now at laying like floorboards, you know? Yeah. So.
I love Valerie, the way you say stuff and then you say, can I say that? I love that.
Say it first. Shoot first, ask questions later. Yeah.
You mentioned creativity, it's oozing out of you. You mentioned hipster and your parents would be hipster. You mentioned that they could have a TV show. I think you might be talking about yourself here. Huh. You could have all of those things if you wish. I want to talk to you about your bread in a moment, if you don't mind, because you know, you did something recently where you put up a soda bread recipe online. One of your, might talk about your sons if you're open to that. One of your sons did some video work, and as a result of that, I made my first ever soda bread, and it was
your first ever, really? Oh my God, I'm stunned that that was your first ever. See, I think people are doing this stuff all the time, but yeah, I was here like everybody going, because just before this stuff kicked off, I was looking at a premises, you know, on the West Coast to rent for the summer to do a bakery school. And I was like, okay, I don't know if we can talk about this in a second, but, you know, I've always had a lot of where will I put my attention and kind of you know, I'm good at a lot of things. So I found it very hard to focus on doing one thing. But of course we don't have to just do one thing. But so I had all, you know, I was building up to do my bakery school and making all these plans, and I hope that it will still happen. But I thought, well, I'll just do some videos. And it was funny, for years I thought about doing videos, but I overthunk it to the point where I didn't do any videos. And then, I mean, all you have to do is make the bloody video. Like, it's so easy. Yeah. And I've done a lot of cooking classes and demos, and I've done a few bits on TV. I know how to condense everything. I hate having to edit. You know, so I'll do anything to not have to edit. So yeah, I just shoot it fast, you know, run away.
And you know, you came on yesterday as an audience member, and you're watching young Owen Sheehan, and he's a guy who's become very comfortable in the video space over the last number of years. And he said himself yesterday, it took 6 months to get comfortable. Now it just flows out of him. But that's any particular skill set. I mean, I put a huge amount of effort into that delicious soda bread because it was my first time. I had to think through every step. I loved your term, I overthunk it. We do overthunk far too much stuff. So would you bring us up to Vals Kitchen and the business and how it was going? And then you hit a bit of a challenge last year before COVID. Would you mind touching on that if you're comfortable?
Yeah, well, I suppose we can go from Vals Kitchen. When I was blogging, then the Bridgestone guy got in touch with me. So I don't know if people know them, the McKennas, John and Sally McKenna. Anyone in the food business would know them. You know, they do these circular plaques that you see outside everyone's restaurants. Those plaques are actually the real thing. A lot of the other ones aren't. People just send them a letter and say, okay, for €500, I'll send you a plaque and say restaurant is great. But the Bridgestone is the real, Bridgestone and the Michelin are the real McCoy. So I became a restaurant critic with my two sons. And because I was a single parent at the time, it was easier for me to bring them with me. Now, I didn't do this all the time. If I wanted to have a nice Barolo, I wouldn't bring the lads. But I would bring them with me. So the three of us, the two of them were like the mini critics. So Saoirse just, he knows, he could write a book about fish and chips because everywhere we went, he just said fish and chips. And then Leon would be on the foie gras, you know, and the crab claws and the lobster thermidor. So we had a funny, we always made these jokes that even though I suppose from the outside, you know, as a one-parent family, you might think life was like this, but actually we had our kind of second millionaire lifestyle running alongside it that had all these beautiful restaurants and events and things. So we've had a lot of lucky breaks, you know. We were on the Little ad a few years ago as well as a family, which was hilarious. But they looked after us very well, let me tell you.
I have to comment on that, and it was seeing one of your sons talk about condoms, if I'm not mistaken.
That was me.
You know, and I just thought, classic Val O'Connor.
You know what? I was just walking along and I was reading things that were laid out in the boxes. I mean, I didn't even know until we saw that ad that I had said that. We were just, So I was saying like toothbrushes, soap, and then there was something that said family pack, and then beside it was condoms. So I just read the words family pack condoms, and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. You know, that ad, they had to have a watershed for it. And it wasn't because I said condoms, it was because I said Jesus.
Oh my goodness.
Can you believe that? They got the advertising watchdog got 17 complaints because I said Jesus. Really? Yeah, I didn't say like
shocking. Apple. You're a shocking woman, Valerie O'Connor.
Yes,
you're welcome on my show. Right.
Hilarious. But yeah, the bread book then, I can't remember the initial idea was because, you know, all the bakeries, all these artisan bakeries and people who'd lost their jobs, you know, how many recessions have we had now? Anyway, in the mid-noughties, there was a recession. So a lot of people and builders and people like that who were suddenly out of work started becoming bakers. So this was the fastest food growing business in the country was sourdough bakeries. And it seems now like it's a new thing, but actually sourdough is now at its peak hipsterness. So I found this amazing and I thought I'll write a book about all these bakers. So I went to the publishers, O'Brien Press, with this idea, but they said, well, if the bakers close down, what's your book going to be in 5 years' time? So rethink it. So I rethunk it. And, you know, there's not actually that many books out there on bread. So because I had my photography skills and I was able to photograph it and do everything myself. So that was very appealing to them. And it also meant I got more royalties. And yeah, so when I did that, what the book really did, I mean, you know, you've written a book. I love your book. Unless you're J.K. Rowling, your book is really just a stepping stone to getting more work. It's fantastic it's the classic exposure, but it does look great. Like if you have a book, you can't take it away from you. And I have 3 books now. The second book, which is a smaller version of the first one, should have them here. They're over there in the shelf. You know, can't get them over here. My levitating finger. The book then, it was kudos for me, and then I started to get, I mean, I was invited to teach and talk, do presentations at food festivals and book signings, obviously. And then when I got my next book, at that stage then I got work from the Irish Independent. I got into fermentation around the same point as the book actually came out. So I was writing for the Irish Independent, the Sunday Times, and then I got a regular column in the Irish Examiner. And I was writing for Food and Wine magazine as well. And then, of course, on the back of that, you get invited to the opening of an envelope, and very tasty envelopes, might I add. The struggle, like, you know, you got to eat so much, right? There's so many events that are food. But yeah, it's a very interesting world, but I would always be more excited by who's doing what and what small businesses are opening. And that's why when I moved back to Limerick in 2008 and I was writing for Bridgestone, and I saw that Limerick was always left behind when it came to food and being known for food. And I thought, okay, well, now I have an opportunity. And I wrote about, God, like 56 different places. And it was great that in the book that year, there were so many pages dedicated to Limerick. And I started to see all the plaques going up on the walls. So I was really happy I was able to do that.
And you ran the Limerick food trail at one stage. And
oh yeah, I did the Limerick food trails. God, I forgot about that. Yeah, it's, so for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, I think maybe I did about a half a dozen of them. Basically, I would bring a group around Limerick and we went, you know, we did the historical part of the food, you know, went to O'Connell's Butchers, where the sites of the abattoirs used to be, which is great fun. You know, my father used to bring us, stand outside the abattoir and hear the pigs squealing. It's like kind of psycho. Anyway, then we go down to the milk market, and so, you know, the people would have an oyster and maybe, you know, a bit of sushi and some cheese from the guys from F and Cheddar, and meet all the producers, because people don't still make the connection that the food does not just appear. You know, the bread does not just appear. Now, the stuff in the packet might just, but even then that's operated by, you know, machines are operated by people. This idea that food just manifests in the supermarket is crazy. You know, we have lost our connection to our food. We don't know where it comes from. If you ask people, you know, not just kids either, like a lot of adults, they have no idea. And I'm not joking when I say people don't know that chips come from potatoes. Some people do not know that. I'm serious. If you say to people, what's bread made of? They'll be like, now look, there's a whole other sector of society who will know that it's got gluten in it. But yeah, it's astonishing, really.
I noticed you mentioned that your provenance is a big thing for you.
Yeah.
So you go right back to first principles, really, don't you?
Well, in Ireland, we have an incredible, now we don't unfortunately have an Irish, there's probably a word in the Irish language for it, what they call terroir. And it's basically the land and what comes from the land. And we have, because we have so much rain, we have incredible pasture. Because of that, we have the best butter. Anyone who's ever lived in another country and got butter, it's so disappointing. It's depressing, isn't it? This unsalted, pale, horrible, tasteless nonsense. And one of the hardest parts about living in any other country is that the butter is terrible and the milk is terrible. I'm not even a big milk drinker. So, and then when all the, remember in the 80s when there was the milk, I don't remember what the story was with the milk, but basically if a farmer produced too much milk, they were encouraged to throw it down the field to keep milk prices, at the market value. But then UCC started to offer courses to farmers in cheese making and to make added value products. And because our milk is the best milk in the world, our cheese then suddenly became the best cheese in the world. And Danish blue cheese. So the guys in Cashel Blue, sorry, they got the recipe for Danish blue cheese and they made their cheese. They made that cheese with their own milk. And it's so successful that most of their export goes to Denmark.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. And the things that people, individuals and families have to go through are supposed to solve a problem. And so many of their problems have been solved, especially in the last 30 years, by starting a food business.
Speaking of solving problems, you're obviously a master at reinvention. You're very creative. You love doing loads of things. Mm-hmm. You can straddle all strata in society based on how you described your life. You had the millionaire lifestyle on the side to the regular, single parent.
A millionaire pauper, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Vagabond millionaire is a phrase I think is a lovely one.
That's nice.
You can
adapt my next book.
Anyway, it just struck me that so business was going along and your master reinvention. You'll never be out without something to do. Do you want to touch on the challenge that hit last year? I want to bring you into COVID and I want to bring you out past COVID, and I want to do that in the next few minutes because I want to get a Q&A from the floor.
Yeah, cool. I'm conscious I'm very glary. The sun is doing all sorts of crazy shit here. Anyway, okay, so I guess my career was going swimmingly. I was doing stuff on TV. I was on TV with Rachel Allen, and it was just, I was on the Pig's Back or Wyndham Wicca. And my eldest son, who's now 22, he was having weird symptoms. His walk was gone a bit strange. His bladder was very overactive. So I brought him to the doctor and she recommended he go for an MRI, and he was diagnosed with MS in 2016, which was, just like a train going through my middle. And to say it knocked me for six, excuse me, is an understatement. The thing with MS is, it's not, it doesn't just knock you for 6 once, it keeps knocking you. And it's a horrible disease. It can be, for people who don't know anything about it, it can really be categorized. It's almost like 2 different illnesses, because one is relapsing remitting, where people might get an attack of MS symptoms, and they can range in anything from affecting your eyesight to your walk, numbness, exhaustion with chronic fatigue, brain fog. It's a whole host of fun. But then those symptoms can go away and you might get another attack for months or years. And some people can live really quite well with it. And then primary progressive, there is no secondary progressive really. That's just, a cotton wool. Here's the cat now, he's going to try and get in. Leon had primary progressive. It was estimated by the time I brought him to a neurologist who knew what he was talking about, that he probably had it from when he was about 10. And I do remember episodes where we could be out for a walk and suddenly he would just, it was as if he was drunk, his legs would just not work properly, and he'd have to nearly be carried, and I would just be scratching my head going, what the hell was that? So, but those episodes would be so infrequent. But then from when he was about 18, it was just so common. So just before he did his Leaving Cert, he was diagnosed. And he's extremely talented artistically. He's doing animation now in the art college, and he had gotten in offers into all the art colleges. Like, I didn't get into Limerick Art College, you know, and he did. And I was like, over my dead body, is he not going to college? So I tried to keep it cool, get him through his exams, and he did get them, and he did get in, and it was a great day when I dropped him off, you know, on his first day. But around this time last year, he just got worse and worse, and his walk was really, yeah, it was just going. Like, we went on holidays to Malta, because I had this sense of, well, if this thing is going to get him, we're going to do some stuff first. And I wanted to go scuba diving with him, because I've been scuba diving years ago, and it's amazing. And Leon loves, well, I mean, he's got such an imagination. I just thought he'd love the underwater. So we did that, and that was pretty cool. But, you know, other than the poor guy, I was like, other than getting him into scuba gear and under the water, you know, he studied for his exams while we were over there, and we went out to restaurants. Leon loves a good meal, so he's a joy to go for dinner with. But when we came back, he was pretty bad, and he went into a rehab hospital in Dublin in the summer. Basically, he walked in and he came out on one of those walkers, because the place, you know, it's not set up for MS people. It's really more of stroke recovery or something. But I could see very plainly with my own eyes that my son was now in a hospital full of people in motorized wheelchairs, and nothing, you know, there was no, we weren't being offered anything that looked like it was going to do anything. You know, he tried this medication and that treatment. I could write a volume that thick on every alternative therapy, every diet protocol, you name it, paleo, vegan, organic, juice, celery juice, Jesus, every pendulum swinging lunatic in the country. No offense if any of them are you. We've been there, we've done it, I've spent a fortune. So the nurse in the hospital took me aside and she said, have you heard of stem cell therapy? And I said, I have, but I wouldn't know where to go. And she gave me the name of a woman. Now, this was basically akin to somebody telling someone about abortion, because they don't offer this treatment in Ireland. And because they don't offer it, they're not going to talk about it. And if you ask a doctor about it, now they are beginning, but it's very slow and painful, and you nearly have to be dead before you'd be approved, and they send you to the UK to do it. So we met this woman who had stem cell therapy in Russia, and basically I thought, well, there wasn't really any alternative. We had to do something. At that stage, I had gotten a motorized scooter for Leon, and didn't want to face reality, because buying a wheelchair for your son is admitting that your son needs a wheelchair. So got the motor scooter first, and then I was like, hang on a second, you're gonna have to get a wheelchair as well, because he had such fatigue, and he was at a stage now where it was even hard for him to get himself around his bedroom, you know. But I had bought, excuse me now if I go back and forth and sideways on this, I had gotten a caravan last summer because I love Spanish Point. So I had my caravan installed, and when he came out of hospital, I just wanted to get him into the water, you know. And yeah, this is a tangent now. If anybody has heard of Wim Hof, please look him up. Yeah.
I'm practicing Wim Hof as we speak. I swam in the river last night.
Did you? Kudos, brilliant. Well, I got Leon into the sea. Now, two of us would have to carry him in. But then he was able to walk out, right? And I was going, what the hell is going on? Now, this is before he had any stem cells. And then I said this to a friend of mine. He sent me a link to a guy, blah, 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 who had MS and who discovered the Wim Hof method. And basically, when he would come out of the water, his symptoms were so reduced. I mean, the fact that he could walk out in the first place, this was miraculous. Now, of course, you know, half of my brain was thinking, you know, you could stick with that, but the reality of it was that the effect would last for a short amount of time. You know, so by that evening, he would be back to So, but it clearly, it does something. It's very powerful. And then myself, for my own stress management, I started doing the breathing method, and I do it every morning. And I found from the very first time I did it, oh my God, it's so grounding, because I was losing my mind in this anyway as well. I'm here, okay? And so yeah, we started doing that, and that was great. But also I had to get my shit together. Sorry, there's another watershed. And start raising the money for this. Sorry, Colin. I said the bad F word if you're not careful. I had to raise all this money. The cost of the treatment was 45,000, and then we needed the extra money for our flights, our visas, accommodation, and then incidentals, which I was advised to add in because of what might happen when we came home. So, but my fantastic friend Dee McMahon beside me, we went to Richard Lynch, who runs I Love Limerick, because I knew we had to write a press release. I knew we had to do a video. I knew we needed photos. I know what the whole strategy had to be to do this as a campaign. But my God, I just didn't have it in me to be able to do it on my own. So once we went down to Richard and his team, and they just took everything and organized, you know, the launch of the campaign and everything that was going everywhere, and interviews. And once we launched that, it was incredible. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the love that the people of Limerick just came out. Like, I would say about 2,000 people have contributed to Leon getting better. And
that was an amazing time. I was privileged to be able to attend the launch that morning in the Strand Hotel with Dee and Richard and yourself, of course, and Saoirse. Leon unfortunately couldn't make it. So powerful.
Yeah, it's incredible when I look back now, what you can do, you know, when you have to, when you have the fire under you, and it's your child, and it's literally your child's life. I mean, when we got him to Russia, it felt like, you know, bringing Jesus to the cross, as if Jesus didn't walk himself, but his mother had him over his shoulder. And the doctors had to do 3 days of tests before they knew they could treat him, because some people already have underlying conditions. Some people, unfortunately, find out they have a heart condition, so they wouldn't be able to take the treatment. Leon had his youth on his side, and his disability was relatively new, which means the chance of it being effective for him were very high. And also, they can only treat you up to a certain level of disability. And Leon, there's this disability scale, and on that scale, he was at 6, 6.5, and 6.5 was a cutoff. So it was like, if you didn't get him there, then he wasn't going anywhere. And I could see from how quickly he was deteriorating, and the doctor in Russia said within 1 to 2 years he would be 100% disabled. 100% disabled is dead, you know? And it isn't just like a nice death either. So yeah, that once he said he could treat him, and that feeling of being able to hand your child over to the experts who knew more than you did. And I came down with a dose of bronchitis like that, and I slept for 3 days in the hotel and just got bored from room service. And
was that you just decompressing? You'd done as much as you could possibly do, yeah?
Yeah, and the Russian hospital, they were so lovely. You know, they treated us like family. It's a completely different experience to being in a hospital here. And now, look, we're a foreign, I suppose, what you call it, medical tourists. And Russia doesn't get a lot of medical tourism. I think it's just this one doctor in this hospital who has the protocol down, and they have the highest success rate in the world. There was actually a conference for this type of stem cell therapy on there while we were there. So people were there from all these different clinics across the world, and it was agreed unanimously that that approach works. And it's a combination of, you know, chemotherapy, it's blood stem cell therapy, so it's the stem cells from your own blood, and then a high dose of a certain MS drug, rituximab, that altogether just seems to do the job.
And roll forward to now. Tell us about Leon today.
Well, within 2 days of having chemo, and he had chemo for 4 days, he was able to walk. So firstly, it shows you the chemotherapy works in MS, so people should be able to get it. So, but now, I mean, well, he was a new man like overnight. His brain fog was gone. His pain was gone. He was in pain all the time at that before we went. So he can walk now. Now he's still building up his walk. So when he goes out for a walk, say we live very close to the People's Park. So he can now walk like 3 times around the park, which is a fairly significant walk. I mean, that's a couple of kilometers. And he got through his treatment. He was in the hospital in Russia for 5 weeks. I stayed there for 3 weeks, and then he went into isolation. So I came home. Although really I may as well have stayed there, you know, because I was still there really in my soul. But he just, the doctor said, and I know we've all heard this before, your attitude is so important with your recovery. He said, if you say to me, you fix me, yeah, it might work. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to do this, he said, we will do this together. And it was like, Leon just made a decision that all he was doing now was recovering. That was it. And he went into this beautiful kind of Zen-like state. He sailed through it. He had no complications. He never complained of anything, and he was just chilled out the whole time. So his younger brother came with us as well. And we were able to be there pretty much all the time. So we would just get a bus back to the hotel and then go into the hospital, and I drank a lot of tea. A lot.
I think I would have drunk a lot of vodka, but anyway, well done on the tea.
Yeah, I drank vodka too. You know, vodka, beer, whatever, you name it. But tea.
One thing that struck me, you mentioned last night, it came up earlier that you went into rehab some time back here in Ireland and walked in and came out on a walking frame. And you were telling me, I think yesterday, that he now does his 3 laps of the People's Park. And what does he use?
Just his legs.
Didn't use. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
He uses these trekking poles. Yeah. Well, those walking frames are the worst things for people with MS. They're probably the worst things for anyone because of what it does to your posture. So the trekking poles make sure you stay upright, and also you're not really leaning on them. You know, they're fantastic on the beach. Actually, when we were doing the getting out to the sea thing, the trekking poles were great to get down to the water. But he brings them now as for me, it's like, you know, psychological backup really. Just in case. So if you feel tired.
Congratulations to you and to him, in particular to him. And we do this deaf community wave. So to just that's our clap, deaf community clap to our guests. So well done to you and to Leon. And also delighted that Leon is doing well. Saoirse is obviously fully part of this. Saoirse's younger brother.
Saoirse is the most incredible brother. You know, the two of them are quite close in age, 18 months apart, and they absolutely love each other. And Saoirse would do anything for Leon. And he was great in Russia because it meant we were able to take turns. You know, if one of us was exhausted and we just wanted to stay in the hotel, or in my case, go into Moscow city center and look at nice buildings. He was there, and yeah, it was very, very hard for him to see his brother be so unwell. But even in all the time when he was as bad as he was, on any day that he was able, Leon would get himself up, get dressed, and go to college. And he went to college on a motor scooter with his rucksack and his sticks. And I was so proud of him every time he went out the door. And I thought, and I was still teaching classes. I was still working away during that time, because if you can go to work at all, you know, you should. And my patience was very short with people. But I would see him go down the road, and I would just be so proud of him. I thought, if he can do that, I can do it. He made it easy by being the way he was. He only got angry once or twice, and there was dark times, but he's such a peaceful and lovely person that it's very easy to take care of him.
Oh, it's a beautiful story, and I really appreciate that you've gone that deep with us, Val. Thank you very much. Never any pressure for people to do that, but the whole idea of what I've tried to create here is this: we bring real people on to share real stories about where they are. It started because of COVID. We wouldn't be doing this except for COVID, but I really appreciate the fact, because there are people on the call here who've got their own challenges, whatever they might be. So it's nice. In a warped sort of way, it's nice that we find other people who are open about their challenges, and we can feel not alone in our stuff. Could I won't, if you don't mind, go back, because I'd like to go to Q&A from the floor. So we won't necessarily go back into Vals Kitchen, except I have to assume that you're going to just keep reinventing. There's going to be more videos, etc.
Well, funny thing, somebody said to me last week, I said this to you last night, that he said, well, you're lucky because you've been through a lot of hardship recently with, you know, sickness. And I looked at him at the time and I thought, what kind of a thing is that to say? But he was absolutely right, because we are so relaxed now in this time, because personally, there's no threat on us. Like Leon has been isolating for weeks already. Excuse me. He does go out for a walk once a day. He's very careful. He has to walk because he has to do that, you know, and we all go out for a walk once a day. But we feel now that we're having a recovery time from the insanity of that time that was, because the exhaustion, you know, you don't actually realize how exhausted you are. But that cliche that everybody says, that it makes you stronger. Shit like this really does make you stronger. Sorry, I did it again. And I have no fear anymore about doing a business or doing this or doing that or not doing something. And how much I would attach to it has completely lessened. What I mean by that is, say I'm doing my very first online class on Saturday.
Woohoo!
I know, yeah. I'm excited and I'm nervous. I'm totally confident in what I'm doing, but I've never done it like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't get to taste anything. But I have a bunch of people signed up already, so I'm really excited. And the main reason people are doing it is not because they want to learn about sauerkraut. It's because they want to do something together like this. That's why I'm signed up to other people's classes. But it just gives you a perspective on really what matters and what doesn't. So I love teaching. I love teaching a lot more than I thought I did. I really care about all that I said at the start. But otherwise, we really have to learn to go with the flow. Because even if COVID-19 wasn't happening, none of us know what's happening tomorrow. We don't know what's happening next year.
Yeah, well said. On that note, can you give us, you've clearly got a very blessed family, dare I say that openly. I think you have a very blessed family unit. You clearly, all three of you love each other, would die for each other. And it's just beautiful to see. And you've been through a really, really strange, warped view in that phrase that Val, how lucky are you? You've been through all this shit before, right? And but you are zen in this period of COVID. So what one tip can you give us all? And then I'd like to go to Q&A from the floor, if I may, Val. What one tip would you say to any of us to help us cope with COVID-19?
Focus on the things that are your business. And I don't mean your business as in the thing you do to make money. It's like you cannot control whether or not there are hospitals, whether or not we have facilities. You can't control what other people are doing if you see gangs of people walking around. So the what ifs are absolutely pointless and draining. And I know I am the mistress of what ifing. So we're always being, we're living in this parallel of we're supposed to live in the moment, but really nobody is. And now you have to live in the moment because that really is all there is. So, take care of what you have to take care of, which is putting food on the table. I don't think it's a time for us putting ourselves under pressure for self-improvement or bodybuilding. Just exhale and enjoy each other's company, really. That's the most important thing, is when you're having a meal with your family, look at them and say, wow, how lucky am I? And if you're having a meal with yourself and you're healthy, say, how lucky am I? Or the cat or the dog. And I guess, yeah, it's classic of appreciating what you have. We're living in relative luxury. We're not in pain. We're not being bombed. We're not hungry. So just try and keep some perspective. And everyone's in the same boat, so.
Beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
Beautifully said. Focus on what you can do something about, and don't get bent out of shape with the rest. You also said we're not being bombed. There's nobody in that type of physical pain. It is a world war. I've called it World War C, and we're all in this together. So we got to mind ourselves first, and then take care of each other out there. Valerie O'Connor, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're not letting you go. We're going to do Q&A, but this is us clapping you for your openness and your honesty. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Q&A from the floor. Who would like to ask Valerie a question, please? They're too shy, Val. I think perhaps you went deeper than expected.
It's too early in the morning and alcohol free for that level of time.
But that's okay. Hold on 2 seconds now. We've got Eamon Smith. I'm going to bring you in to share what it is you're sharing there. Eamon Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Valerie, thank you so much for sharing. No, the only reason I love to pop up with a question that I will find will help me, and that maybe I can share back to others in the bits and pieces that I can serve and contribute. But I don't have any question, because I was scribbling, and I even had different colours to scribble. This is about this. This is about this. There's so much beautiful stuff in there. I took a lot of notes there to reflect back on later on. And I thought I need to do some sort of a mind map and separate this stuff out. There's really lots of powerful stuff in there, even when you were sharing your story. And I can relate to bits and pieces of it here and there. And just thank you for that. I think you probably covered the question I would have asked when you talked about counting our blessings, appreciating what we have, first world problems. That's a big one for me as well, is what can I control and what have I got no control over, and keep coming back to that. I don't have a question. You pretty much nailed my question. It would have been around that. I think my thing is, well, here's one actually I like to ask sometimes on Colin's shout. Would you have a thing that you would do first thing in the morning, Valerie, like a bedrock grounding thing, something that really helps you ground you and get into that, okay, this is my stuff, this is my shit, this is what I can control. What tips do you have that you ground you, let's say? Well,
like we said already, the Wim Hof stuff.
Yeah. I've only just recently actually come across that in the last week. I'm a new subscriber. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
I find there's a world of, there's so much choice out there now. We can be completely bombarded with Vipassana meditation, or you name it, and I'm the world's worst meditator, right? I can't hack it. But yeah, Wim Hof, the breathing, maybe 3 rounds of breathing, and then followed by about 20 press-ups on a breath hold. About 10 minutes of yoga and a cold shower. That's it. So most days I would do that. And of course, ironically, since this has started, I think I'm signed up to do a yoga or a Pilates class online every day. And I'm also going for a walk every day. So I think I'm probably taking care of my fitness more than I have in a couple of years. But yeah, Wim Hof, that would be the thing. And then some days where I just, I wake up and I'm in, you always know, I know when I open my eyes how I feel. And also just don't take your feelings so seriously. If you're in a bad mood, just be in a bad mood. Just go with it, because no one's going to feel happy all the time in this situation. We're feeling a collective kind of pain for the world. So, just let yourself feel that. And I always kind of cozy up to my low moods and go, okay, Grant, so what are we doing now? It's a bit like Gollum. What you want to do? As soon as you do that, it just goes away. And so what? It's going to go away anyway.
Hold
on to tight.
When I was a teenager, Lord of the Rings came out as a book. I'm showing my age here, and I was lovingly, I assume, referred to as Gollum back in the day.
You were referred to as Gollum, were you?
Yeah. It was.
Oh my God.
Anyway, great question, Eamon. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Eamon, if you want to get my contact from Colin and chat further, I'd be happy to talk about stuff.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Valerie O'Connor, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Coffee at 11. Thank you very much for your time, for your openness, for your honesty, for who you are, for what you do. Keep up the wonderful work, keep up the great spirits. And will you send me some stuff about your links to your online classes and whatnot, and we'll share that out if that's okay, yeah?
If anyone wants to learn how to make sauerkraut on Saturday morning, I'm only charging €10. We're going to beat the living daylights out of some cabbages.
I love it. Okay, Valerie O'Connor, pleasure.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
okay.
Namaste.
Namaste.